Yes, yes. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Balloon Parties, driven by Munganess, St. Louis Acura. Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota. My name is Timothy Michael McKernan. That's Jackson Burkett. And Jackson has a wide berth Wednesday prepared today. Jackson, I want you to answer this question at the outset. Do I need to get my Venmo ready?
It might be. It might be needed.
All right. If you have a deep dive request, if you want a topic discussed, if you want to hear what critics have called the most brilliant mind in the history of St. Louis media, nay, media in general, go into his wealth of knowledge, his what critics have called infallible memory. I'll Venmo you $35 if you want to come up with it. You can text that in, 314-399-9646, or talk it over with, Droid Effects, Tiny PP,
yeah.
Eric Nickens. I don't know. I'm not in the YouTube chat right now. You can talk it over in there, and then I'll take a look in the YouTube chat, and we can go deep diving. Because Jackson says maybe the Wide Berth Wednesday isn't as strong as you'd like it to be.
I mean, I have some good questions in there.
I'm sure you do. I don't doubt my mind.
Yeah.
But you're just letting the audience know maybe today is a good day for a deep dive.
It's always fun to do a deep dive. Wednesdays are usually good days to do so. Cardinal season starts up here in Tim, about 34 hours?
I think you might be right on that.
34 hours.
Scott will be in center field. We bet $100 that he'd be on the roster, so you need to Venmo me that.
I'll have to go back on the tapes to
play the audio.
Pull that receipt. But, yeah, that's kind of how my first question leads off. The 12 and 24 campaign gets underway here in about 34 hours. Describe your excitement/intrigue this year compared to years past, and also compare your intrigue and excitement to what you perceive the general fan base's feelings are. Victor Scott will get the nod in center. How does that impact your excitement?
Well, I like all your questions, so maybe I don't need to spend $35 today. But my expectation of what the offseason would be is... I'm fine with it, not because I think it means the team's going to be good, but I'm fine with it because I kind of view them in a weird spot. And the weird spot is this television situation, which I think, by the way, is what Scott Boras did not calculate in his off-season strategies. A number of teams are pressing pause. Now, you already have half the teams that decide they're not going to compete. It's fun. We all play Vanderbilt in the SEC. But then the number of teams that were going to be aggressive this offseason, I think, was reduced because of the uncertainty of the television contract. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a limited number of teams willing to pay long-term deals, then if you're negotiating in October and November, demanding Jordan Montgomery gets 5 or 6 years and Blake Snell gets 5 or 6 years, two guys in their 30s, Cody Bellinger gets 5 or 6 years, that's how you wind up with Blake Snell signing last week with the Giants on what essentially is a 2-year deal, and Montgomery actually now has to hit a certain number to get 2 years out of his deal. So if we were to go results-oriented, Jackson, we would say, boy, wouldn't it be nice if the Cardinals would have gotten Montgomery for a year and $25 million? But what I would tell you, and I would imagine everyone would agree with this, is Jordan Montgomery's asking price when the Cardinals signed Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, specifically, not Sonny Gray, was likely, at least $100 million more.
Right.
So this is the result of an agent having a disastrous offseason. And I believe the reason why he had a disastrous offseason is because he did not realize how many teams were pulling back. And I believe the reasons why teams pulled back, at the top of that list is the uncertainty surrounding television, which makes sense to me. I don't think many fans care for it because they view all these guys as billionaires and they should just spend money, even if it's loss. But I think that's what factored in. So my view on the Cardinals is anybody can win that division. I'm actually surprised to see that ESPN has the Cardinals. They don't necessarily have them finishing fourth, but they polled, I think, 16 or 20 of their baseball writers. And the order of votes for the winning of the Central, Cubs 1, Reds 2, and then the Cardinals and Brewers each got 2 votes to win the Central, which ties them for third. And then only one writer sees the Cardinals in the wild card. So this is a rare time where both the fan base in St. Louis and the national opinion of the Cardinals, not necessarily the organization and its performance over the last quarter century or since Bill DeWitt bought the team, but going into the season matches up. National writers aren't high on the Cardinals, and locally, people are not high on the Cardinals. I don't think nationally people have the anger that many in St. Louis have toward the Cardinals. But I think many nationally have the disinterest that some have locally in the Cardinals. Jackson, thoughts, concerns?
Comparatively, I would say with the national thing, I've seen the Cardinals finishing fourth. I've seen them finishing first. The Athletic did the same thing where they polled their staff, and they had the Cardinals winning. And matter of fact, they had them at 38% to win the division. That's more, and the next team, I believe, was the Reds at 23%, or maybe the Cubs. Either way, it seems like the consensus around the nation is that the NL Central is an absolute crapshoot, and that's probably the case.
I think in particular, one of three teams. You know,
right? I
mean, the Brewers would be more of a surprise than take your pick of the other three. So it's Cardinals, Reds, or Cubs who you're going to see.
Yeah.
If I had to bet, I don't know. I mean, I'd be like, oh my God. I mean, I might as well just like play roulette. It's just a total guess. A lot of it will have to do with who stays healthy. And right now, as things start, the Cardinals are already losing that battle.
Totally. And it seems like also the consensus nationally and certainly locally is that the offseason was blah. Like nothing is going to excite you about the team that happened in the offseason. I think where you're pulling excitement from is to see guys further develop, whether that be Mason Wynn in his first time up in the majors.
I can't wait to watch guys run the bases.
Yeah, Victor Scott, obviously.
Victor Scott and Mason Wynn in particular. I mean, I would love to see Scott at the top of the order. My guess is he's probably going to be more 7, 8, so you're going to have two speedy guys at the bottom with Wynn and Scott tomorrow night in Los Angeles. With the wind blowing out 10 to 15 miles an hour, if you can get an overbet in now, might be a good idea.
What do you think that number's at 9.5 with the Dodgers going crazy in South Korea? That's kind of I was thinking about that this morning.
Who's throwing for them? Glasnow?
Yeah.
But he's I mean, he'll strike you out, but he's got a wide delta at times too. That's a lot of health related wide deltas for him. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go 9 on the nose.
Okay,
9 on the nose.
Yeah, we can take a look, but I think also excitement's getting pulled from the further development of guys like Gorman and Walker, and that's not an ideal offseason. You'd hope. I mean, but last year people were excited about Wilson Contreras, and while he had a good year at the plate, certainly had some trouble behind the dish, mostly just being available to be behind the dish, and the pitching staff certainly suffered because of it. So
total tomorrow night 9 o'clock. Venmo me another 100.
It's 9.
9. Did I say 9 o'clock? How weird is that?
That's the start of the Illinois game.
It is the start of the Illinois game. Brad Underwood yesterday saying he's going to sleep during the day because they'll be tipping off at 10:10 in Boston. And by the way, I'll take the over on that.
100%.
You're with me, so I can't win the bet.
If there's any sport worse than playoff hockey on getting the puck drop / tip-off time right.
Tournament.
College basketball in general, man. Those 6 and 8 o'clock for SEC games.
They give 2 o'clock window. What's my deal with these clocks? They give 2-hour windows.
Right. Gabe DeArmond, the Colonel, has always been against it because they'll like SEC games, 6 and 8 p.m. Central, and the 8 p.m. game, you miss the first 6 minutes of the game because the first game goes long every time.
ILL tips off tomorrow night against Iowa State. We'll focus on the Central Time Zone. Even though at this point the show is huge on the East Coast.
That's right.
I'll say 10-17, 0.5.
10-17?
10-17.
Eastern.
I'm sorry, 9-17.
Okay.
Central.
Yeah, I would go over that.
You're going over? Wow.
I would be like 9:21, like 9:21.
Okay.
Because who's playing, UConn and San Diego State go long,
right.
They have to warm up. They have to do all that. And if there's late game fouls, yeah, it's crazy. It's nonsense. The idea that you can get a college basketball game in 2 hours is with 4.
And here's the thing.
times.
I think they know it, but they just can't. It's already a problem that their time as it is.
Yeah.
That you got 2 teams from a central time zone playing as late as they are.
Right.
That they don't want to go, I mean, we probably should say it's 9:30.
Right.
It'll piss people off even more. But it's what they do every year with the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, oh boy, that's always.
But at this point, we're just kind of used to it. Oh, Blues starting at 8:40. Sure. See you at 8:55. All right, Jackson, what else do we have here? What else is going on? Well, let me see. I probably need a break. I'll do that. I'm in the mood for a deep dive. You told me you were in the mood for love. And you were hoping I would reciprocate, and I said, I'm in the mood for a deep dive. So let's see what they got. 314-399-9646. And then all I hope is that Tiny Pee-Pee's doing okay.
Yeah, hopefully he's on vacation somewhere remote.
Yeah, you were going to give him the place in the Hamptons. And I didn't think it was this week, though. I thought it was more of an April thing.
Yeah, we have a pretty extensive background check thing going on there. And
oh, I didn't know you were Airbnb.
It was close. It was close. I suggested a couple places, a couple B&Bs down the road. But I have a deep dive question for the next segment that I'm curious.
You're going to save me $35? Tease it.
Well, I think it'll also give some of the listeners more time to come up with the topic if they want something to be discussed. But
what is it? Get better at teasing.
It has to do with the St. Louis Cardinals over the last 25 years.
Okay.
And it relates to the Dynasty docuseries that you can watch on Apple TV with the New England Patriots.
Which so far I have watched like the first few episodes. And the Mike Martz interview. So you've watched it?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. I thought when you reacted like that, you knew what I was talking about.
No.
It's just, for so many reasons. All right. I'm looking forwድ to this.
Yeah.
Look at you.
You're going to put on like a producer's
Was this in the Little
hat.
Piddles Wide Berth Wednesday? Did you ad-lib it? Okay.
This isn't.
Good.
Yeah.
You're earning your keep today, aren't you, boy?
I'm trying. Just trying my best. That's what I do every single day, Tim.
I think the audience knows that.
It's like you have to accept that you're not always going to be successful, but it's the effort you put into it that you can control.
That's what you can control. It's like you're reciting the Serenity Prayer here on the...
I love the Serenity Prayer.
Is that right? Do you really?
Yeah, I think it's a great life lesson, you know?
Why don't you share it with the audience who isn't familiar?
I believe it goes, give me the strength to not worry about the things I can't control.
Hairline, height, skull shape.
The courage to do what I can control. I'm butchering it.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
And the wisdom to know the difference.
Wonderful. Look at that.
So that's bad paraphrasing, but that's basically it.
You got the idea, though.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing. You are essentially Lil Serenity Prayer.
There could be worse things to be titled, I'll tell you that much. Little Piddles, namely, being one.
We'll take a break. Jackson's got a dynasty question on the Cardinals because they've won a World Series
2 times.
13 years ago.
Yeah. What a time.
But you're thinking dynasty if they can win.
Well, it's less... Well, once you hear the question, you'll understand a little more.
I'll trust you here. And then you can send in your deep dive request for the second half of Balloon Party, 314-399-9646, or in the YouTube chat on the 101 ESPN channel. That's sponsored by Air Alliance Team, the sponsor of our studio cameras. This is Balloon Party, driven by Munganess, St. Louis Acura, Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota. Munganess, St. Louis Acura, Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota, presenting sponsor of Balloon Party on 101 ESPN and on the 101 ESPN YouTube channel, and the place I go to get my car, the place I recommend you go get your car as well. Whether you be buying, whether you are leasing, whether you are looking for a new car, whether you are looking for a pre-owned vehicle, it doesn't matter. You're going to be working with the best, and the best is Jamie Burkhardt, Clayton Patterson, Peter Munganess. And then in the service department, Ryan Seiberg. So many wonderful people who I've gotten to know over the last few years, and I just recommend wholeheartedly. And when you had a car issue or when you needed to get a car service, lease a car, pre-owned, new, it doesn't matter. For most of us, it's like, oh, I got to deal with this. This is going to be a pain. Well, guess what? Once you start working with the people at Munganess, St. Louis Acura, Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota, honestly, it's pleasant because that's the caliber of operation they run. They're online at stlouisacura.com and altontoyota.com. Tip of the cap to the audience here on 101 ESPN because there's a number of great deep dive topics in the Air Comfort Service text line. So that is wonderful. But Jackson has one of his own here on this Little Piddles Wide Berth Wednesday. So we'll tend to that. And then I'll go deep diving in the second half of Balloon Party, driven by Munganess, St. Louis Acura, Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton, Toyota. Jackson, the floor is yours.
Sure, man. The Dynasty docuseries featuring the New England Patriots dynasty has turned some heads. Philly fans were mad at some of the editing of the broadcast calls. Robert Kraft was disappointed with the less than positive approach. But I want to ask you about the Cardinals. If they made a Cardinals docuseries starting in 2000 and going till right now in 2024, how do you think it would be framed? What smaller moment or point in time could be an entire episode? Where would things turn? And what would be important things to focus on to paint the entirety of the picture?
Wow. I mean, if you were, some would say more savvy, others may say less honorable, you could have texted that in and received $35.
Nah.
But you know what? They might call you Little Serenity Prayer. But you know what you are to me? Big integrity.
Thank you. That means a lot.
That's a great question.
Thanks.
I could go on, because here's the thing. I'm going to think of things, but then the audience is going to think of a bunch of other things. So what would be like a moment that you could build the whole episode around?
Right.
I mean, the obvious one, everything is always going to default back to the ninth inning. I mean, I guess the one that became more famous, even though I disagree with it. And for the record, David Freese thinks the ninth inning was a bigger deal than the home run in the podcast that may never be released with him and Pat Maroon. But that game 6.
Right.
And then you build it around Freese's life.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me has the potential for like a book or a movie or a 30 for 30. Because oftentimes baseball, unless you're talking about the Yankees or Red Sox and maybe the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are kind of a unique situation here because they have been on a heater going back to the Cardinals in NLCS in 2013. Maybe you could even go back to when they beat the Cardinals in the NLDS in 2009. But they've got one world championship, and it was if there's one world championship you didn't really want to win, it was the one during the COVID year. Mm-hmm. So they're a weird spot. Point being, few teams outside of those teams, and the Cubs, I guess, have a national appeal. And the Cardinals are a national brand, but also, I think, viewed maybe as a little more boring. Kind of like with Spurs,
yes.
if I can draw an analogy
really good
to your associate. Dan McLaughlin just texted me, and it's a great call. See, I was going to go with Freeze, Darryl Kyle.
I was going to say that week in 2002.
That week in 2002 when Jack Buck passed away, there's a picture of Darryl Kyle standing on the first baseline as the hearse begins to make its way around the warning track. And 4 days later, he's gone. Mm-hmm. And that 2002 team in particular. So if you want to talk about a moment, there is a moment. Freeze's life before and after October 2011. I mean, that was a tough spot. That was a tough spot with what he was dealing with, and he's open about it in the podcast that is under lock and key with me, him, and Pat Maroon. But there's got to be. I mean, Bobby Bonilla getting injured in 2001.
That's where I would start it. Like, that would be like if the first
and the reason
episode.
I say that, just on the off chance you don't know it, is Albert Pujols isn't going to make the roster. Now, eventually, you would think anyway, he was going to be called up, but he was not going to make the major league roster. So you've got that moment, as Dan made reference to in his text, Darryl Kyle's passing in that week and that team. I think few teams since 2000 have been more emotionally distraught than the Cardinals were at two different times in one season. Obviously, when they lost their teammate in 2002 in June, but then when they lost to the Giants in 2002, they felt like they were a team of destiny. When they would win both the division and then they beat the defending world champion Diamondbacks in the NLDS, they would carry Darryl Kyle's jersey out on the field. They would spray it with champagne in the clubhouse. They just were convinced that they were going to win. And I think his closest friend on that team, and this is just me observing it, I don't know this to be the case, was Matt Morris. And Morris dealt in Game 5 in San Francisco. But just like the year before, they were beaten and eliminated in the bottom of the ninth in a walk-off. Womack got him in 2001 with the Diamondbacks, and Kenny Lofton got him in 2002 with the Giants. And I think the feeling was, let's get this back to St. Louis, and we're going to win Game 6 and 7. And then we're going to beat, I think it was the Angels and Twins that were playing in the ALCS. And they were convinced. So that is an outstanding one. If you wanted to start the whole Pujols thing, you could go to October 2005 in Houston and Game 5 and how loud that ballpark is and setting the stage with that, and then how silent it becomes. That's one of the things that those guys who were on that team, they all say the same thing when they're asked about that moment, is how I think Edmonds was on base, and he's like, I could hear my spikes hitting the dirt as I was rounding the bases when Pujols hit that home run, and how he couldn't hear himself seconds beforehand because it was so loud, and then he could hear his cleats on the dirt.
Right, and I'm just thinking of like you have Pujols rounding it, and then you cut to Edmonds with like a one-on-one interview saying something like that.
Sure.
That's like just so powerful and underscores that moment perfectly. And I talked in my question about like where things turn, and I think it was safe to say 01 to 11 was like the real powerful era of the Cardinals in the 2000s. Obviously, the Pujols era.
I think I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry I cut you off. But I mean, they still went to an NLCS and a World Series after, I mean.
Oh, no doubt.
And then 12, 13, 14, and then 100 wins in 15.
Right. Well, I guess then you go to 2014, and then in the offseason, the tragic passing of Oscar Zvereis was a real moment in terms of the turn.
That's another one.
Because the domino effects after that
of like outfielder after outfielder after outfielder. Well, he's the solution. They're the solution, and nobody's been the solution.
Right. I think that would kind of transition into the more modern era.
Trading Gallen and Alcantara for Marcell Ozuna.
And then
got to show the highlight of him climbing the wall for the ball landing on the running track. And
with heavy
Dodgers
orchestras.
Laughing. Absolutely. The sound off letters about the neon yellow sleeve.
Yeah.
I'd like to voice that.
Yeah. So I think that there
Dorothy Light writes.
But there are like entire episodes made out of 2011. You could go the 2011 regular season's almost like that last month, starting in August when they made the run. Like that's almost a whole episode leading into
Scott Spezio.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not as well known as Freeze as far as the moments, but he had some big moments in 2006.
Yeah. And Keel.
And Keel's a great one.
Yeah.
That actually, I mean, like I said, anytime we talk about that, there's two moments in Tony La Russa's time in the dugout when he was manager in St. Louis when I saw him smile strangely. One was right before Freeze's hit to tie it.
Right.
Because I don't know. He's just like, okay, I'm going to smile. My career's about over, because he knew he was retiring. And then when Ankiel hit that home run in August of 2007 in his first game back to the major leagues, this time as a position player. And the thing is, I'm sure I'm leaving some things out. That's the thing about it. That's how great the run has been. Then you sit there and you go, okay, then what happened to have 16, 17, and 18 be blah and have a fan base truly be, as we sit here right now on the eve of the 2024 season, more either angry or apathetic, whatever negative emotion, whatever negative adjective you want to attach to it, than I can recall, and what has caused that. This is a different deal here, because number one, and by that I mean different deal here. What do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is different deal than take your pick of the four major North American professional sports leagues and how important the Cardinals are relative to other franchises and their respective homes. And the Cardinals are, without question, top 5%, maybe even higher than that. You know, think Packers to Green Bay. So with that established, if indeed that is the case, you have the love fest of 2000. It really kind of went back to McGuire, actually, because when that was going on locally, there wasn't a thought process from many people anyway that something was awry. So it begins when they acquire McGuire in July of 97, all the way through, pick whenever you would want to say it stops and starts. Yeah. Would it be 2015 when they lost to the Cubs? I don't know. I don't think that was really dramatic when it happened.
Right.
Cubs were a really good team, but then it was just blah in 16, 17, and 18. The 2019 team goes to the NLCS, but it was not a great team, and it was shown as such when they were, kind of just euthanized by the Nationals.
Yeah, that whole playoff run was like the 10-run inning in Atlanta, and then everything after that stunk.
So what I'm saying is it's rare for a team to have the presence that this one does as far as an importance to a region, really, not just a city, but a region. And this is a large region, at least from a square mileage standpoint. And then have the emotion toward the organization, despite, again, I want to emphasize relative success of an NLCS in 19, a playoff spot in 20, a playoff appearance in 21, winning a division and a playoff appearance in 2022, and then the last place finish last year. And then people go, well, then it must have been 2023 on the outside looking in. And I would tell you, this has been going on well before they were last place last year. It just intensified it. And again, it's either anger or it's apathy. And I think the latter is more dangerous than the former. It's more dangerous if you have people going, yeah, I just don't expect them to. Of course they didn't get Jordan Montgomery. Of course they didn't get Blake Snell. And, of course, they're celebrating getting Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn and going to spin it like they had a big offseason. And, of course, they're going to talk about Yadier Molina is going to be a big part of the organization. And, of course, he didn't show up to Jupiter. They just don't expect to be told the truth. And at its core, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's necessarily the business model of the organization, but I do think at the moment that is the feeling that is going on from the fan base, not all of the people, but a decent number toward the organization, and what caused that breach of trust and either that anger or that apathy. And you gotta like try to isolate a moment. I don't know what that moment would be.
Right.
If you have it, feel free to send it in. 314-399-9646, Air Comfort Service text line. This is Balloon Party on 101 ESPN.
This is Action Jackson with a Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Blues are back in action tomorrow night as they take on the Calgary Flames. You can catch that game right here on the home of the Blues. That's 101 ESPN. Pregame starts at 6 p.m. Puck drop at 7 p.m. And last night, the Lakers defeat the Bucks 128-124 in double overtime. Anthony Davis, 34 points and 23 rebounds. That was another SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Jackson, I got so many things here. I don't even know where to start. I'm going to try to keep them all organized, but I know that's not my specialty. I snorted 3 rails of Adderall during the break. One of them off your lower back, too.
Yeah. Thanks for clearing it.
Thank you. Number 1, the Sports Center update.
Yeah.
I thought Blues don't play until tomorrow night. They'll take on the Flames right here on 101 ESPN, pregame at 6 p.m. And then last night in Nashville, Vegas picked up a point by beating the Predators, or by going to overtime with the Predators. But Nashville wins the game. Blues now 6 points back of Vegas for a playoff spot with 10 games remaining. I thought, oh, there you go. That's your Sports Center update brought to you by, I assume, Sound Story. But instead, what did we hear? We didn't hear that, did we?
Well, Blues and Flames tomorrow night. Home of the Blues, 101 ESPN.
Then I thought it was going to be a segue into the Vegas-Nashville result, which, of course, is material to the Blues' chances. But instead, what did we hear?
Oh, instead, you got the score of the Lakers and Bucks. The Lakers defeating the Bucks.
But the Lakers' win has nothing to do with the Blues' chances of making the Stanley Cup playoff.
But they won. No Braun. No Braun. Still got the W. Anthony Davis, 23 rebounds. It's hard to get 23 rebounds. It's hard to get 15 rebounds, let alone 23. I thought the people might want to know that.
My counsel has advised me to distance myself from that Sports Center update. Second topic. The people are they're firing on all cylinders in the YouTube chat, 101 ESPN YouTube channel. Even without Tiny Peepee's presence, a lot of concern for Tiny Peepee's health. Hopefully, I would assume he's vacationing, but 103 people are in there talking it over. And also in the Air Comfort Service text line. And I don't even know which text to pick to read, but I could do. How many hours do you want me to do today? I can do 10 of them.
Let's do 10.
I don't think I can. I got
Okay.
BK and Ferrario like in 18 minutes.
Yeah.
But this is a great observation. Look at the difference in talent acquired versus the successful era and the new era. 97 to 2014, McGuire, Rowland, Edmonds, Renneria, Walker, Sanders, Holiday. Also, I'm not disrespecting the texter, but leaving out one of the people we talked about in the first or second segment, Daryl Kyle. And I feel like I'm leaving out some others. Woody Williams actually needs to be talked about. Woody Williams was huge for the Cardinals, even though it wasn't a big deal when he was acquired. Cardinals actually wanted Sterling Hitchcock, and the Padres didn't want to part with him, so they gave him Woody Williams, and then Woody Williams winds up being huge for him. And then 2015 to 2024, Ozuna, Andrew Miller, Brett Cecil, Dexter Fowler, Mike Leake, Drew Verhagen.
Oh, boy. God, that is brutal.
That was like a series of kicks to the groin right there.
Not one of those people worked out. Not even one.
They have been filling needs with middle tier, and it never works. There is now a belief that the top-tier talent is out of our reach. It's hard to imagine we would even acquire players like Goldschmidt or Arenado anymore. That's from the 314. Now, what I will present regarding what is a very well-stated text, you did include Goldschmidt and Arenado. That would have been disingenuous not to include it. The way that trades often happen now, and since, if you want to use 2015 to 2024 as your point of reference, even though I think for the most part it started before then, and the difference is the Cardinals were able to pilfer the A's for McGuire, the Rockies for Kyle, the Rockies, although it was the A's, but they had been talking with the Rockies for Holiday, and they traded Brett Wallace for Holiday in 2009, and then Kennedy and Bottenfield for Edmonds in March of 2000, Bud Smith and Mike Timlin and Placido Polanco for Scott Rowland in July of 2002. Larry Walker was an after the trade deadline deal. Renneria was a free agent, so that's a different situation. But point being, the economics of baseball at that time made it clear that you had kind of these quadruple A teams that weren't going to be able to re-sign players, and so then they unloaded them, and oftentimes the Cardinals were the beneficiaries of that, whereas the Yankees and Red Sox were throwing money around more often. That's how they loaded up their talent for that era. With regard to present day, you really don't have that all too often, but you have had it a couple of times in the last 7 years. And one of them was Paul Goldschmidt with the Diamondbacks, and the other one was Nolan Arenado with the Rockies, and the Cardinals were there to swoop in and get him. And the Cardinals were also trying to do the exact same thing with Giancarlo Stanton.
Yeah.
And they were, and they did, except Stanton didn't want to come here. And then they were like, okay, then we want Yelich. And at the time, the Marlins weren't parting with Yelich. But the guy they liked more than even Stanton was Yelich, or Derek Gould. Derek Gould was on this from the get-go, and this was me and him talking on a podcast a bunch of times and also off air. And he's like, the guy they like, and I wouldn't say it if he didn't say it on the record as well, but he did. The Cardinals want Yelich. That's the guy they like the most. That's who they think is the best. But they're like, okay, well, if they're not going to trade Yelich, we got to get somebody in here because they keep messing up this outfield thing, so we'll get Ozuna. Point being, the Cardinals' success has, in part, over the last quarter century, been capitalizing on the failures of other organizations and those teams being stuck with a great player who they've got to move because they know they're not going to re-sign. So the economics of the game, or the model of the game, and teams trading those players really benefited the Cardinals in the first 14 or so years of this century. And it's happened a couple times since then, but it just hasn't been as prevalent. The topic that I'm getting the most requests on talking about is the Shohei Ohtani topic. I'm interested in it. I have to say that. I want to make this clear. I don't know what the thought process is on the audience's end. I'm interested in it. But I don't, at the same time, I don't know if people in the listening audience, and I realize it's not going to be unanimous, but if people are like, I'm tired of it, I have moved on, or if people are like, no, there's more there, I want to keep talking about it. What do you get the sense is?
Oh, I think people want to talk about it.
I think people do want to talk about it. All right,
Yeah.
I want to talk about it, so that's where we'll go in the final segment. And I will give $35 to, even though a bunch of people texted it in, I'll give it to the one that I saw first that laid out a nice case on it. So I will send a text to this person during the commercial break, and we will lay that out and the angle he took on it, and I'll give you my perspective. That is coming up. Also, a friendly reminder, 101 ESPN will be broadcasting live from the Budweiser Brew House inside Ballpark Village next Thursday for opening day. I'm out of town for my sister's wedding next week, Jackson, but I'm sure you'll be signing glossies and shaking hands down at Budweiser Brew House, I assume?
Yeah, that's right. Just, get clearance first.
What do you mean? You got to talk with security or something?
Yeah, just, proceed with caution, I would say.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm a dangerous man.
I understand that. The home opener is almost here, and we'll be set up just steps away from Busch Stadium with the opening drive, BK and Ferrario, and the Fast Lane all coming to you live next Thursday, April 4th from Ballpark Village. Our opening day broadcast brought to you by Holiday World and Splash and Safari and Budweiser. We'll take a break. Take a different angle, I think, a slightly different angle anyway, on the Ohtani story in the final segment before BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Welcome back, Balloon Party. Final segment of the day. You can always go back and podcast, though. Dobbs Tire and Auto Center's podcast. Jackson, here is the text. It's going to get $35 from my Venmo. It's going to Jimmy Numbers in the 63109. Do I have 63109 bias? Maybe I do.
Yeah.
Maybe I do. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, it's your people's.
Here's the text. Tim, please deep dive on the Ohtani bookie. The bookie obviously is not a street corner hustler who keeps a small gambling book, runs numbers, and plays some three-card Monte. Doesn't your gambling background tell you the bookie is a big organization that is used to dealing with high-stakes gamblers? And as this gambling debt went from 4, 5, 6, and 7 figures in size, would not the organization ask to speak directly with the presumed backer, Ohtani, rather than taking the interpreter's word about his backer? And would not the gambling organization shell out a few Benjamins to have their own Japanese interpreter during the interview of Ohtani? Illuminate, please. That's from Jimmy Numbers in the 63109.
Illuminate.
I like that. I like the question. Yeah. I may be in the minority on this Ohtani topic. And by that, I mean, I believe him. But what Ohtani's press conference said was what I've thought this was from the beginning. Now, I want to make it clear. I don't know that to be the case, and I'm not saying that there's not more to it. Double negative. With regard to Jimmy Numba's question, I could be off the mark on this, but if you are the bookie and you are getting paid...
Yeah, you're not...
You don't give a damn where it's coming from. So if we're operating on the premise that the bookie wasn't getting paid and then Ohtani came to the rescue, then sure. I don't know how that would happen because that means the guy had racked up $4.5 million in debt and the bookie was going, hey, what in the hell?
Right.
I mean, that'd be a huge deal if you're like the win.
Mm-hmm.
But my understanding of what Ohtani's contention is that he didn't know that this was going on. And I think one of the big things that the public is having a tough time wrapping its arms around is that Ohtani could be unaware that his interpreter was taking out $4.5 million. And I understand that. And I'm not saying you're wrong for thinking that way and that is impossible to. But I will tell you that there are people who, once they have so much money, there are people who are handling it for them and who trust. And if it does not impact their ability, like, so for example, if Ohtani went to buy a $20 million house and he's like, okay, I'm paying cash. And then he, however it would be done, wires the money and then gets noticed that there's insufficient funds, then he would become aware. But if the interpreter in a foreign country is his brother, is like his brother, I realize it's not directly his brother, is handling his money and he's got hundreds of millions of dollars, it is absolutely, and this is where I'm sure plenty of people are just going to go, oh my God, you have your head in the sand. And I would respectfully say you have your head in the sand. That he has other people handling his money, especially when it's not his currency, and he trusts this guy implicitly. There are people who make a lot of money who aren't necessarily savvy. It's not necessarily, breaking news, I don't think, but on the off chance, just because you're a multimillionaire doesn't mean you're necessarily incredibly sophisticated with money, especially if you have kind of walked into it within the last few years. If this were to happen like when Ohtani's in his 50s, it'd be a little strange. But either way, I think that at its core, that's where my opinion on this story and others differentiate. Furthermore, just in general, the way things work in 2024, and I oftentimes click to social media, and maybe that's a blind spot for me personally. Of course, I think it's accurate because who would think they're saying something that on the radio or television or a podcast that isn't accurate unless they're, just knowingly BSing and a part of a, team's payroll or an organization politically's payroll. That there's just an expectation, there must be something more. And then he issues a statement, or as people oftentimes do, they issue an apology, not in Ohtani's case, but that apology, when was an apology on social media ever go, you know what, that was good. It's always skewered.
Yeah.
So you get an explanation, then it doesn't match up with the narrative that has been percolating on social media. Oh, no, of course, Major League Baseball doesn't want their guy out. But I'm just going, I think that the money was stolen from him. If you got to bet, fittingly, on what happened here, I think the money was stolen from him. That's what I think happened. The one thing that I will tell you that doesn't match up yet is why Ohtani's camp, not Ohtani himself, but his camp, continues to say they've launched an investigation with an office, whether it be federally or in Southern California, and then they won't say with whom. I don't understand that, but at the same time, there may be a reason for it. I'm in the minority on this opinion. I recognize that, but that just because I'm in the minority, I'm not going to take a knee and go, I must be wrong. I just think that oftentimes things, especially if you spend a lot of time on social media, that which is not reality becomes your reality, and it actually isn't the truth. And I just think it is absolutely believable that Shohei Ohtani had $4.5 million taken out of his account and sent to a bookie. And as long as the bookie was getting his money, bookie doesn't give a damn. He's got the money. He doesn't care.
Right.
If it's Shohei Ohtani. Now, one of the stories was it's coming from Ohtani's account, and then the bookie started bragging to people that Ohtani was betting through him as a way to give credibility to his book in the federal investigation with this bookie. And that's how this whole story came to light anyway. But yeah, you're welcome to call me naive. That's fine. But I've thought this from the beginning. This is absolutely believable to me. So that's where I am. Your thoughts are welcome on it. 314-399-9646. Or you can participate in the YouTube chat on the 101 ESPN Airlines Team Cameras 101 ESPN YouTube channel. This whole Ohtani gambling thing is out of control. He is the one that is gambling. How is baseball going to let him get away with it? And that opinion right there that was sent in from the 314, I think represents, those who are following it, I think 3 out of 4 people think that at least, if not 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6. I think that's where most people are. You think that, right?
I'm of the opinion that I don't believe Ohtani placed any bets. I don't think he did any sports wagering. Now, I'm a little dubious, I would say. I'm not 100% one way or the other. How could you be? We don't have the hard information. But I'm a little dubious of the theft. I think that a huge hiccup hit the Ohtani camp when $4.5 million wired from Ohtani's account was sent to the bookmaker, and they might have realized after the fact this is going to be a problem because the account under your name, Shohei, was wired to a bookie, and that is illegal federally, and obviously with Major League Baseball, that's a big no-no. And so, in a way, to have a different story, a theft claim was made. That's where, if I had to bet, that's what I think has gone down. I obviously don't know. I am very confident.
So you think, because the initial story was that he helped out his buddy.
Right.
And so then
that's what I believe. That is the first story is what I believe, not the turn afterwards that it was then theft and
Okay, but then I don't understand, what changes by calling it theft?
Well, because then it would be Ohtani not willingly wiring over $4.5 million to a bookie or someone.
But why would it matter if the fact is that he didn't bet?
Because, I just don't know where both federally and Major League Baseball feels about a player's bank account sending over
$4.5 million. They don't like it, but there's going to be text records. There's going to be able to be. If you're now lying and you're saying that this guy stole from you,
right?
You're either going to have to pay him hush money or it's going to come out in court.
Right.
He's going awfully bold here by going on the record and saying that it was stolen from him.
Right. And
so either he's paying off his buddy, who is the interpreter, who's already either gotten $4.5 million for him or has taken $4.5 million from him. We've got to play this out from a rational standpoint, not just spew crap.
I'm not trying to do so.
No, I know you're not. But I'm saying what it was. It's just no way. And we just give takes on Twitter, and you play it out okay. So which one's better and which one's worse? No matter what, $4.5 million came out of his account.
Right.
And then he said, initially, I helped out my guy. And then he became aware that it was $4.5 million. And then he said, this has been stolen from me.
Yeah. And
And he is adamant that he has never bet on any sports. So it's like there would be people who would be able to disprove that. That's how Pete Rose went down. Pete Rose didn't go, yeah, you got me. It was the bookies who got him.
Yeah.
With your guy, Giamatti's father, Abe Bartlett Giamatti.
Right. Originally, I was like, well, there's no way he wouldn't know that $4.5 million taken out of his account. I've watched the clip yesterday on Foul Territory where someone was talking about, I knew a guy who was making $20 million, whose brother handled all their finances. They had no idea.
Kratz was talking about that on Foul Territory.
And
that's the thing. And I think at the centerpiece of this is people don't realize, like me, I get up, I check all of my accounts in the morning, but I'm insane. The average person is monitoring their money. Once you have hundreds of millions of dollars, and you also don't necessarily understand the language for somebody who's not even a third party, who's super close to you to be handling it, it's incredibly irresponsible now based on hindsight. But I'm quite confident in saying that Shohei Ohtani is not the only guy in Major League Baseball who's not handling his money. But I realize the average person can't possibly fathom that is the way that it works. And I think that's probably a disconnect between the public. Like, well, of course he knew. Like, if I lost $1,000, I'm obviously going to handle it. If somebody lost $1,000 and tried to take it out of my account, I would know. But that's not the way that it works once you get into that stratosphere of wealth. We got to go, unfortunately. We will carry the discussion over to tomorrow, I am sure. For Jackson Burkett, I'm Tim McKernan. This has been Balloon Party, 101 ESPN. James Carlton of the Carlton State Farm Insurance Agency is my insurance agent. He's online at carltoninsurance.net. He has 363 five-star reviews on Google, and that's because of the customer service he and his staff provide in Webster Groves for all of the St. Louis metropolitan area. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Tim. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you, man?
I am doing well. That was world-class interview skills on display on your podcast yesterday.
Thank you so much, James. What a wonderful interview with the great Brianna Coppage and Megan Gaither. Jackson, you can watch that at youtube.com/TMASTL or the Tim McKernan Show podcast. Thank you, James. You're a gentleman for the
time. Some other great news. Hot off the press, we're in our 13th year of business. We're very grateful for that. Yesterday, we ended, or about to end the month, with the most applications we've ever taken in our 13-plus years, which is an indication on how competitive our auto, home, and life insurance rates are right now. So if anybody's seen a price increase or if anybody's had a claims experience that hasn't gone to the way they'd like, feel free to reach out, carltoninsurance.net, or by calling, texting 314-961-4800.